Hello and welcome. Welcome to another Read With Me session. I'm yours truly, Isabel Bedell, and I'm here to read with you an amazing part of this amazing book. It's The Good to Great, amazing creation by Jim Collins and his amazing team. It took over 5 years to write this, and it was a combination of the efforts of 21 people. So it's no easy task to create this, and I'm really excited to share what this particular chapter is going to go into. So this is the second part of chapter 2. We're going to get into how ambition for the company is and how setting up successors for success, how that actually happens. In the previous part of this chapter, we discussed how all good to great companies had level 5 leadership at the time of transition. And level 5 leadership is when you are building enduring greatness through a paradoxical blend of personal humility and professional will, meaning you become selfless. You become zero egocentric. Every effort, all your energy goes towards the bigger mission of the company, and you're empowering those around you to create a dynamic that just moves the company forward, or the mission of that particular organization. So let's get into how ambition is properly set up for a company. When David Maxwell became CEO of Fannie Mae in 1981, the company was losing $1 million every single business day. Over the next 9 years, Maxwell transformed Fannie Mae into a high-performance culture that rivaled the best Wall Street firms, earning $4 million every business day and beating the general stock market 3.8 to 1. Maxwell retired while still at the top of his game, feeling the company would be ill-served if he stayed on too long, and turned the company over to an equally capable successor, Jim Johnson. Shortly thereafter, Maxwell's retirement package, which had grown to be worth $20 million based on Fannie Mae's spectacular performance, became a point of controversy in Congress. Maxwell responded by writing a letter to his successor in which he expressed concern that the controversy would trigger an adverse reaction in Washington that could jeopardize the future of the company. He then instructed Johnson not to pay him the remaining balance of $5.5 million and asked that the entire amount be contributed to the Fannie Mae Foundation for Low-Income Housing. David Maxwell, like Darwin Smith and Coleman Mockler, exemplified a key trait of level 5 leaders: ambition first and foremost for the company and concern for its success rather than for one's own riches and personal renown. Okay. Wow, this is very important here. Level 5 leaders want to see the company even more successful in the next generation, comfortable with the idea that most people won't even know that the roots of the success trace back to their efforts. And as a level 5 leader, I want to look out for my porch at one of the greatest companies in the world someday, and will be able to say, I used to work there. In contrast, the comparison leaders, concerned more with their own reputation for personal greatness, often failed to set the company up for success for the next generation. And after all, what better testament to your own personal greatness than that place falls apart after you leave? Ooh. In over 3/4 of the comparison companies, we found executives who set their successors up for failures or chose weak successors, or both. Some had the biggest dog syndrome. They didn't mind the other dogs in the kennel as long as they remained the biggest one. One comparison CEO was to have treated its successors candidates the way Henry the VIII treated wives. Consider the case of Rubbermaid. an unsustained comparison company that grew from obscurity to number one on Fortune's annual list of America's most admired companies, and then just as quickly disintegrated into such sorry shape that it had to be acquired by Newell to save it. The architect of this remarkable story, the charismatic and brilliant leader named Stanley Galt, became synonymous in the late 1980s with the success of the company. In 312 articles collected on Rubbermaid, Galt comes through as a hard-driving, egocentric executive. And in one article, he responds to the accusation of being a tyrant with the statement, "Yes, but I am a sincere tyrant." In another, drawn directly from his own comments on leading change, the word "I" appears 44 times. I could lead the change. I wrote the 12 objects. I presented and explained the objectives, whereas the word "we" appears just 16 times. Galt had every reason to be proud of his executive success. Rubbermaid generated 40 consecutive quarters of earnings growth under his leadership, an impressive performance and one that deserves respect. But this is the key point. Galt did not leave behind a company that would be great without him. His chosen successor lasted only 1 year on the job, and the next in line faced a management team so shallow that he had to temporarily shoulder 4 jobs while scrambling to identify a new number 2 executive. Galt's successors found themselves struggling not only with a management void, but also with strategic voids that would eventually bring the company to its knees. And of course, you might say, yes, Rubbermaid fell apart after Galt, but that just proves his personal greatness as a leader. Exactly. Galt was indeed a tremendous level 4 leader, and perhaps one of the best in the last 15 years, but he was not a level 5 leader. And that is the one key reason why Rubbermaid went from good to great for a brief shining moment, and then just as quickly went from great to irrelevant. Wow. That's very important here. Wow. A compelling modesty. In contrast to the very I-centric style of the comparison leaders, we were struck by how the good to great leaders didn't talk about themselves. During interviews with the good to great leaders, they talk about the company and the contributions of other executives as long as we'd like, but we would deflect discussion about their own contributions. When pressed to talk about themselves, they say things like, "I hope I'm not sounding like a big shot," or "If the board hadn't picked such great successors, you probably wouldn't be talking to me today," or "Did I have a lot to do with it? Oh, that sounds so self-serving. I don't think I can take that much credit. We were blessed with marvelous people," or "The plenty of people in this company could have do my job better than I do." It wasn't just false modesty. Those who worked with or wrote about the good to great leaders continuously use words like quiet, humble, modest, reserved, shy, gracious, mild mannered, self-effacing. They understand, did not believe their own clippings, and so forth. Board member Jim Havoc described Ken Iverson, the CEO, who oversaw Nuclear's transformation from near bankruptcy to one of the most successful steel companies in the world. Ken, he's a very modest and humble man, and I've never known a person as successful in doing what he's done that's as modest. And I work for a lot of CEOs of large companies, and that's true in his private life as well. The simplicity of him. I mean, the little things like he gets his dogs at the local pound. He has a simple house that he's lived in for ages. He only has a carport, and he complained to me one day about how he had to use his credit card to scrape the frost off his windows, and he broke the credit card. You know, Ken, there's a solution for it. Enclose your carport. And he said, heck, it isn't that big of a deal. He's that humble and simple. The 11 good to great CEOs are some of the most remarkable CEOs of the century, and given that the only 11 companies from the Fortune 500 met the exacting standards for entry into this study, yet despite the remarkable results, almost no one ever remarked about them. George Kane, Alan Wurtzel, David, Coleman, Darwin, Jim, Lyle, Joe, Fred, Cork, Carl, all of these. How many of these extraordinary executives have you heard of? None of them. None of them are women, too. Interesting. At least not here. When we systematically tabulated all 5,979 articles in the study, we found fewer articles surrounding the transition date for the good to great companies than for the comparisons, and by a factor of 2. Furthermore, we rarely found articles that focused on the good to great CEOs. The good to great leaders never wanted to become larger than life heroes, and they never aspired to be on this pedestal or become unreachable icons. They were seemingly ordinary people quietly producing extraordinary results. Some of the comparison leaders provide a striking contrast. Scott Paper, the comparison company to Kimberly-Clark, hired a CEO named Al Dunlap, a man cut from a very different cloth than Darwin Smith. Dunlap loudly beat his own chest, telling anyone who would listen and many who would prefer not to about what he had accomplished. Quoted in Business Week about 19 months atop Scott Paper, he boasted, "The Scott story will go down in the annals of American business history as one of the most successful, quickest turnarounds ever. Other turnarounds pale by comparison." And according to the Business Week, Dunlap personally accrued $100 million for 603 days of work at Scott Paper, and that's $165 per day, largely by slashing the workforce, cutting the R&D budget in half, and putting the company on growth steroids in preparation for sale. And after selling off his company and pocketing his quick millions, Dunlap wrote a book about himself in which he trumpeted his nickname Rambo and Pinstripes. I love the Rambo movies he wrote. Here's a guy who has zero chance of success and always wins. Rambo goes into situations against all odds, expecting to get his brains blown out, but he doesn't. And at the end of the day, he succeeds. He gets rid of the bad guys. He creates peace out of war, and that's what I do. Darwin Smith may have enjoyed the mindless Rambo movies as well, but I suspect he never walked out of the theater and said to his wife, I really relate to this Rambo character. He reminds me of me. Granted, the Scott Paper story is one of the more dramatic in our study, but it's not an isolated case. In over 2/3 of the comparison companies, we noted the presence of a gargantuan personal ego that contributed to the demise or continued mediocrity of the company. Wow. We found this pattern particularly strong in the unsustained comparisons cases where the company would show a leap in performance under a talented yet egocentric leader, only to decline in later years. Lee Iacocca, for example, saved Chrysler from the brink of a catastrophe, performing one of the best celebrated and deservedly so turnarounds in American business history. Chrysler rose to a height of 2.9 times the market at a point about halfway through the tenure. Then, however, he diverted his attention to making himself one of the most celebrated CEOs in American business history. Investors Business Daily and the Wall Street Journal chronicled how Iacocca appeared regularly on talk shows like the Today Show, Larry King Live, and personally starred in over 80 commercials, entertained the idea of running for president for the United States, quoted at one point, "Running Chrysler has been a bigger job than running the country, and I could handle the national economy in 6 months." And widely promoted his autobiography. The book, Iacocca, sold 7 million copies and elevated him to rock star status, leading him to be mobbed by thousands of cheered fans upon his arrival in Japan. Iacocca's personal stock soared, but in the second half of his tenure, Chrysler stock fell 31% behind the general market. And sadly, Iacocca had trouble leaving center stage and letting go of the perks of executive kingship. He postponed his retirement so many times that insiders at Chrysler began to joke Iacocca stood for an "I am a chairman of Chrysler Corporation always." And when he did finally retire, he demanded that the board continue to provide a private jet and stock options. And later he joined forces with noted takeover artist Kirk Payne to launch a hostile takeover bid for Chrysler. Chrysler experienced a brief return to glory in the 5 years after Iacocca's retirement, but the company's underlying weaknesses eventually led to a buyout by a German car maker, Daimler-Benz. Certainly, the demise of Chrysler as a standalone company does not rest entirely on Iacocca's shoulders. The next generation of management made the fateful decision to sell the company to the Germans. But the fact remains, Iacocca's brilliant turnaround in the early 1980s did not prove to be sustained, and Chrysler's failed to become an enduring great company. Wow. I mean, these examples are like back to back, just like you gotta see there's a very like bold, bright pattern happening here. Unwavering resolve to do what must be done. It is very important to grasp that level 5 leadership is not just about humility and modesty. It is equally about ferocious resolve and almost stoic determination to do whatever needs to be done to make a company great. Indeed, we debated for a long time on the research team about how to describe the good to great leaders. And initially we penciled in terms like selfless executive and servant leader, but members of the team violently objected to these characterizations. Those labels don't ring true, said Anthony Shirkon. It makes them sound weak or meek, and that's not at all the way that I think of Darwin Smith or Coleman Mockler. They would do anything, almost anything, to make the company great. Then Eve Lee suggested, why don't we just call them level 5 leaders? If we put a label like selfless or servant on them, people will get entirely the wrong idea. We need to get people to engage with the whole concept, to see both sides of the coin. And if you only get the humility side, you miss the whole idea. Level 5 leaders are fantastically driven, infected with incredible need to produce results, and they will sell the mills or fire their brother if that's what it takes to make the company great. When George Kane became CEO of Abbott Laboratories, it sat in the bottom quartile of the pharmaceutical industry at drowsy enterprise that had lived for years of its cash cow, erythromycin. Kane didn't have any inspiring personality or to galvanize the company, but he had something much more powerful: inspired standards. He could not stand mediocrity in any form and was utterly intolerant of anyone who would accept the idea that good is good enough. Kane then set out to destroy one of the key causes of Abbott's mediocrity, nepotism, systematically rebuilding both the board and the executive team with the best people he could find. Kane made it clear that neither family ties nor length of tenure would have anything to do whether you held a position in the company. And if you didn't have the capacity to become the best executive in the industry in your span of responsibility, then you would lose your paycheck. Such rigorous rebuilding might be expected from an outsider brought in to turn the company around, but Kane was an 18-year veteran insider and a family member, the son of a previous Abbott president. Holiday gatherings were probably tense for a few years in the Kane clan. And sorry I had to fire you, want another slice of turkey? In the end, though, family members were quite pleased with the performance of their stock, and for Kane, set in motion a profitable growth machine that from its transition date from 1974 to 2000 created shareholders a return that beat the market 4.5 to 1, handily outperforming industry superstars like Merck and Pfizer. Upjohn, the direct comparison company to Abbott, also had family leadership during the same era as George Kane. And unlike George Kane, Upjohn CEO never showed the same resolve to break the mediocrity nepotism. By the time Abbott had filled all the key seats with the best people, regardless of the family background, Upjohn still had B-level family members holding key positions. Virtually identical companies with identical stock charts up to the point transition. Upjohn then fell 89% behind Abbott over the next 21 years before catapulting in a merger to Pharmacia in 1995. Wow. As an interesting aside, Darwin Smith, Coleman Mockler, and George Kane came from inside the company. Stanley Gull, Alt Dunlap, and Lee Iacocca rode in as saviors from the outside, trumpets blaring. This reflects a more systematic finding from our study, and the evidence does not support the idea that you need an outsider leader to come in and shake up the place to go from good to great. And in fact, going for a high-profile outside change agent is negatively correlated with a sustained transformation from good to great. Sustained, keyword, sustained. Sustained transformation from good to great is not coming from an outsider's perspective. It has to be from someone that understands the business from the inside and can grow it from the outside. 10 out of the 11 good to great CEOs came from the inside of the company, 3 of them by family inheritance, and the comparison companies turned out outsiders with 6 times greater frequency, yet they failed to produce sustained great results. Wow. A superb example of the insider-driven change comes from Charles R. Quirk, Walgreens 3D, who transformed Dowdy Walgreens into a company that outperformed the stock market by over 15 times from the end of 1975 to January 1st, 2000. And after years of dialogue and debate with his executive team about Walgreens food service operations, Quirk sensed that the team had finally reached a watershed point of clarity and understanding. Walgreens' brightest future lay in convenient drugstores, not food service. Dan Jordan, who succeeded Walgreens as CEO in 1998, described what happened next. Quirk said at one of our planning committee meetings, okay, now I am going to draw a line in the sand. We are going to be out of the restaurant business completely in 5 years. And at the time, we had over 500 restaurants. You could have heard a pin drop, he said. I want to let everybody know that the clock is ticking. And 6 months later, we were at our next planning committee meeting when someone just mentioned that in passing that we only had 5 years to be out of the restaurant business. Quirk was not a real vociferous fellow. He sort of tapped on the table and said, listen, you have 4.5 years. I said, you have 5 years 6 months ago. Now you've got 4.5. Well, the next day, things really clicked into gear to winding down our restaurant business. And he never wavered. He never doubted. He never second guessed. Like Darwin Smith selling the mills at Kimberly-Clark, Walgreens' decision required stoic resolve. Not that food service was the largest part of our business, although it did add substantial profits to the bottom line. The real problem was more emotional. Walgreens had, after all, invented the malted milkshake, and food service was a long-standing family tradition dating back to his grandfather. Who would have thought? I did not know that. Some food services outlets were even named after the CEO himself, a restaurant chain named Corky's, but no matter if Walgreens had to fly in the face of long-standing family tradition in order to focus on its resources where it could be best in the world, which was convenient drugstores, and Cork would do it quietly, doggedly, simply. The quiet dog nature of level 5 leaders showed up not only in big decisions like selling off the food service operations or fighting corporate raiders, but also in a personal style of sheer work-like diligence. Alan Workstill, a second-generation family member who took over his family's small company and turned it into a circuit city, perfectly captured the gestalt of this trait. When asked about the differences between himself and his counterpart CEO at Circuit City's comparison company, Wetzel summed up that the show horse and the plow horse, he was more of the show horse, whereas I was more of the plow horse. Wow. The window and the mirror. Alan Wurzel's plow horse commitment is fascinating in the light of the two other facts. First, he holds a doctor of jurisprudence degree from Yale. Clearly, his plow horse nature had nothing to do with the lack of intelligence. Second, his plow horse approach set the stage for truly best in show results. Let me put it this way. If you had to choose between $1 invested in Circuit City or $1 invested in General Electric, on the day that the legendary Jack Welch took over GE in 1981 and held to January 1st, 2000, you would have been better off with Circuit City by 6 times. And that's not a bad performance for a plow horse. You might expect extraordinary results like these would lead Alan Wurzel to discuss the brilliant decisions he made, but when we asked him to list the top 5 factors of his company's transformation ranked by importance, Wurzel gave a surprising answer. The number 1 factor was luck. We were in a great industry with the wind at our backs. We pushed back, pointing out that we selected the good to great companies based on performance that surpassed their industry's average. Furthermore, the comparison company Silo was in the same industry and with the same wind and probably bigger sales. He debated the point for a few minutes, with Wurzel continuing his performance for attributing much of his success to just being in the right place at the right time. And that is something that we learned in the psychology of money. Not necessarily it matters what it is, what industry, what product, what what industry, what product, or what service you're doing. It matters what time you are living in, what is happening right now, like the right time, the right place. Later, when asked to discuss the factors behind the enduring nature of the transformation, he said that the first thing that comes to mind is luck, and I was lucky to find the right successor. Luck, what an odd factor to talk about, yet the good to great executives talk a lot about luck in our interviews. In one of our interviews with Nucor executive, we asked why the company had such a remarkable track record of good decisions, and he responded, "I guess we were just lucky." Joseph F. Coleman, 3D, the level 5 transition CEO of Philip Morris, flat out refused to take credit of his company's success, attributing his good fortune to having great colleagues, successors, and predecessors. Even the book he wrote, a book he undertook under the urging of his colleagues, which he never intended to distribute widely outside of the company, had the unusual title, "I Am a Lucky Guy." The opening paragraph reads, "I was a very lucky guy from the beginning of my life. Marvelous parents, good genes, lucky in love, lucky in business, and lucky when a Yale classmate had my orders changed to report to Washington, D.C. in early 1941 and instead to a ship that was sunk with all hands lost at the North Atlantic, and lucky to be in the Navy and lucky to be alive at 85. We were at first puzzled by this emphasis on good luck, and after all, we found no evidence that the good to great companies were blessed with more good luck, or more bad luck for that matter, than the comparison companies. Then we began to notice a contrasting pattern in the comparison company executives. They credited substantial blame to bad luck, frequently bemoaning the difficulties of the environment they faced. Compare Bethlehem Steel to Nucor. Both companies operated in the steel industry and produced hard to differentiate products. Both companies faced the competitive challenge of cheap imported steel, yet executives at the two companies had completely different views of the same environment. Bethlehem Steel CEO summed up the company's problems in 1983 by blaming imports. "Our first, second, and third problems are imports." Ken Iverson and his crew at Nucor considered the same challenge from imports a blessing, a stroke of good fortune. And are we so lucky? Steel is heavy and they have a good ship. It was all the way across the ocean and it just gave us a huge advantage. Iverson saw the first, second, and third problems facing the American steel industry not to be imports, but management. He even went as far to speak out publicly against the government protection against imports, telling a stunned gathering to fellow steel executives in 1977 that the real problems facing American steel industry lay in the fact that management had failed to keep with the pace of innovation. The emphasis on luck turns out to be part of a pattern that we came to call the window and the mirror. Level 5 leaders look out the window to apportion credit to factors outside of themselves when things go well. And if they cannot find a specific person or event to give credit to, they credit good luck. At the same time, they look at the mirror to apportion responsibility, never blaming bad luck when things go poorly. The comparison leaders did just the opposite. They look at the window for something or someone outside of themselves to blame for poor results, but would preen in front of the mirror and credit themselves when things went well. Strangely, the window and the mirror do not reflect objective reality. Everyone outside the window points inside directly at the level 5 leader, saying, he was the key. Without his guidance and leadership, we would not have become a great company. And all the level 5 leaders point right back out the window and says, look at all the great people and good fortune that made this possible. I'm such a lucky guy. They're both right, of course, but the level 5s would never admit that fact. Very interesting. Very interesting take. Wow. Cultivating level 5 leadership. Not long ago, I shared the level 5 finding with a gathering of senior executives. A woman who had recently become chief executive of her company raised her hand and said, I believe what you say about the good to great leaders, but I'm disturbed because when I look in the mirror, I know that I'm not level 5, at least not yet anyway. Part of the reason I got this job is because of my ego drives. Are you telling me that I can't make this company great if I'm not level 5? I don't know for certain that you absolutely must be level 5 leader to make your company great, I replied. I will simply point back to the data. Out of 1,435 companies that appeared in the Fortune 500, in our initial candidate list, only 11 made the very tough cut into our study. In those 11, all of them had level 5 leadership in key positions, and including CEO of the pivotal time of transition. She sat there, quiet for a moment, and could tell everyone in the room was mentally urging her to ask the question. Finally, she said, can you learn to become a level 5 leader? So here he has a breakdown, professional will, and then personal humility on the two sides of level 5 leadership. Wow. My hypothesis is that there are two categories of people, those who do not have the seed of level 5 and those who do. The first category consists of the people who would never in a million years bring themselves to subjugate their egoistic needs to the greater ambition of building something larger and more lasting than themselves. And for these people, work will always be first and foremost about what they get. Fame, fortune, adulation, power, whatever. Not what they build, create, contribute. The great irony is that the enemies of personal ambition that often drive people to positions of power stand in the odds with the humility required for level 5 leadership. And when you combine the irony with the fact that the boards of directors frequently operate under the false belief that they need to hire a larger than life egocentric leader to make an organization great, you can quickly see why level 5 leaders rarely appear at the top of their institutions. And that makes so much sense, you know, like now more than ever right now, like just speaking in today's time, it hit me. Like you see brands like liquor brands, right? tequila brands, vodka brands, whiskey brands, just to name a few, you know, it's it's not that The Rock, like let's just say, Wayne Johnson didn't go into the distillery and, you know, craft this amazing tequila. Okay. I wouldn't even consider him doing that. He has so much other things going on. But they choose this like over the top, huge personality to be the face of the brand. So it has more credibility and it reaches more markets. Cool, the face of the brand. But then if you put that person as CEO, they're always going to be thinking of themselves first because that is their natural nature, versus a person that can actually go into a company and look at it as this is the work of art that everyone can contribute, everyone can receive from, everyone can come in and benefit from, versus I made this happen and me is the reason why this is created. I love this so much because I feel like I'm I'm definitely still in light years away. I wouldn't say light years. I want to say that I'm working towards becoming a level 5 leader, but there's still a connection to me that I'm like speaking to you as me. You know, I still have that within myself. And once I learn to fully separate myself from, you know, creating a brand, a personal brand, and then creating a company brand, and then disconnecting myself from like what that personal brand is to my company brand. Now I feel like that's where a level 5 leadership can blossom, you know, because it's not standing on my shoulders. It's actually just creating something as a like a synergetic flow from who I am naturally, if that makes sense, and allowing others to propel the mission forward. Okay, let's get into this. And we're almost done here. The second category of people, and I suspect the larger group, consists of those who have potential to evolve to level 5. The capability resides within them, perhaps buried or ignored, but they're nonetheless. And under the right circumstances, self-reflection, conscious personal development, a mentor, a great teacher, loving parents, a significant life experience, a level 5 boss, or any number of other factors, they begin to develop. Oh, I was just talking about this. I love when that happens. In looking at the data, we noticed that some of the leaders in our study had significant life experiences that might have sparked or furthered their maturation. Darwin Smith fully blossomed after his experience with cancer. Joe Cullinan was profoundly affected by his World War II experiences, particularly the last-minute change of orders that took him off a doomed ship on which he surely would have died, in a strong religious belief where conversion might also nurture development of level 5 traits. Coleman Mockler, for example, converted to an evangelical Christianity while getting his MBA at Harvard, and later, according to the book Cutting Edge, became a prime mover in the group of Boston business executives who met frequently over breakfast to discuss the carryover of religious values to corporate life. And other leaders in our study, however, had obvious catalytic events that they just led normal lives and somehow ended up at the top of the level 5 hierarchy. I believe, although I cannot prove, that the potential level 5 leaders are highly prevalent in our society. The problem is not, in my estimation, a dearth of potential level 5 leadership. They exist all around us if we just know what to look for. And what is that? Look for situations where extraordinary results exist, but where no individual steps forth to claim excess credit. You will likely find a potential level 5 leader at work. For your own development, I would love to be able to give you a list of steps on how to become a level 5 leader, but we have no solid research data that would support a credible list. Our research exposed level 5 as a key component inside the black box of what it takes to shift a company from good to great. And yet inside of the black box, is yet another black box, namely the inner development of a person to level 5. And we could speculate on what be inside that inner black box, but it would most likely be just that, speculation. So in short, level 5 is just a very satisfying idea, powerful idea, and to produce the best transitions from good to great, and perhaps an essential idea. A 10-step list to level 5 would trivialize the concept. Trivialize the concept. My best advice, based on research, is to begin practicing the other good to great disciplines we discovered. We found a symbiotic relationship between the level 5 and the remaining findings. On the one hand, level 5 traits enable you to implement the other findings, and on the other hand, practicing the other findings helps you to become level 5. Think of this way. This chapter is all about level 5s, who they are. The rest of the book describes what they do. Leading with the other disciplines can help you move in the right direction. There's no guarantee that doing so will turn you into a full-fledged level 5, but it does give you a tangible place to begin. We cannot say for sure what percentage of people have the seed within, on how many of those can nurture it. And even those of us who discovered level 5 on the research team do not even know for ourselves whether we will be successful in fully evolving to level 5. And yet, all of us who worked on the finding have been deeply affected by it and inspired by the idea. Darwin Smith, Coleman Mockler, Alan Wurtzel, and all the other level 5s we learned about would have become models for us, something worthy to aspire towards. And whether or not we make it all the way to level 5, it is worth the effort. And for like all basic truths about what is best in human beings, when we catch a glimpse of the truth, we know that our own lives and all that we touch will be affected and will be better for the effort. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Incredible chapter, you know, like there's something about a chapter or like understanding within, because like if you have done the work, meaning like the emotional, the personal development, if you've done a level of work within yourself, you can confidently reach something like this and have hope and see a path or see, you know, a vision of where you can go towards. I feel like if someone doesn't significantly feel that they can love themselves, or like at least have a level of acceptance that, hey, I do need to work on myself, or I need to really change my mindset or improve my mindset, then there's no way. I don't feel there's no way that that person can become a level 5 leader, you know, or can read something like this and be like, you know what, that's definitely attainable, achievable, and something that I can accomplish, you know. Maybe I'm just like, I'm biased on how to, I don't know. I just don't believe that people can just come out of the gate knowing things. I think it's a matter of like learning how to do it and going through the ups and downs of life and understanding what those ups and downs are and processing them and working through them and really understanding where you're going. You know, I'm really grateful for this book, because I feel like, you know, finishing off this year, it's important to look at things in the broad perspective. Each book that we've read is very correlated to many parts about our life. And in a way, they all say the same exact thing. But there's something about being able to grab a book that is general, okay, but at the same time have strong research-backed evidence that you can pull to and believe, you know, and not just think it's a concept or a theory, more like, oh, it's actual facts that I can pull from, and then I can start applying because I know the knowledge, I know the resources, and I know that I believe in myself to make it happen. So with that in mind, have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day. This has been an amazing Read With Me session, and I'll see you in the next Read With Me session where we start chapter 3. Talk to you soon. Bye.